Well, hello, Transparent Church and friends. This is Pastor James with the Word of the Day. Today I want to spotlight Psalms number 139, verse number 5 through 7 from the New Living Translation, where we find these words. You go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. 6. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. Verse 7. I can never escape from your spirit. I could never get away from your presence. Well, as we start this new work week and day, I want to use for a theme this week thoughts centered around the issue of loneliness. Loneliness can be prevailing in the lives of even people of God, not only biblical characters, but I was looking at a recent research report from Barna that showed that the number of individuals from Gen Z to the elders who are struggling with thoughts of loneliness. And it's interesting to note that the younger, starting with the Generation Z, persons are the rates from 28% of those that they surveyed were very high. And the older they got, the less likely. I say that to say this. Whatever your age is, it's imperative as believers, for those of us that are, to know what David knew in this passage. David knew that regardless of whatever happened in his life and to him, he always felt the presence of God. Here's what I've learned through the years in my walk and in life. God never leaves. What happens, like in any relationship, one of two things transpire. One, we either draw close, or number two, we drift apart. And so in as much as it feels like we're in lonely situations or we are alone, I've found rather that in those times, those have been times where I've stepped away from God. He's never left in his presence. Notice what David says. I want to challenge you in your own time to read this 139th number in its entirety. He begins to say, you go before me. You're with me. I could never go anywhere from your presence. I know, God, even if I made my bed in the grave, you're going to be there. In other words, he wants us to understand that God has always had him on his mind. That was the revelation that David had. And that's the revelation that you and I have to have in order to combat the challenge of loneliness, knowing that we are never alone. He says, these thoughts are too wonderful for me. He speaks to the omniscience of God and the omnipresence of God. In other words, God everywhere at the same time and all knowing at the same time. And here's what you got to know this week and this day, that you are always on God's mind. And when he has thoughts about you, David says, even in the womb in this passage, you knit me carefully in my mother's womb. In other words, he knew every day that was laid out in his life before he ever took one step. And not just for David, but for you and I. So when you think about those times where you feel lonely and alone, remember the God who made the universe made you and I in our mother's wombs, and he has days and thoughts about us. We can never get off his mind. So let's get him back on our mind. Make it a great day and look forward to touching base with you later in the week, Lord willing. God bless you.